Good morning. It is Friday and a great day for the final one of our installments on the fruits of the Spirit from Galatians 5:22. The second day of temperance or self-control. Yesterday I dealt with the two poles of Epicureanism and Stoicism and how Christianity must necessarily side with Stoicism because otherwise one is just merely an object of one's passions and ambitions and appetites. Today I want to deal with self-control in light of a peculiarly modern problem, and that is addiction. Not that addiction wasn't known in the ancient world, it's just much more common now with the wealth that we have accrued. Addiction has to do with one's neurotransmitters, if you follow the medical model. It has to do with a collapse of one's will, if you follow a more ancient philosophy. It has to do with a spiritual void, a spirituality that ought to be directed toward God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and instead gets redirected, hijacked, if you will, by the desires of the flesh and the temptations of the mind. One of the interesting things about addiction is how it co-opts the will. That was a great discovery and breakthrough of Al-Anon. Your will, when you're addicted, is not the solution to your problem as much as the greatest contributing factor. Your will compels you to find an excuse to drink. Your will compels you to seek out your next fix. Your will compels you to lie to your relatives and friends as you steal from them and fail to meet your obligations. Your will causes you to lie to yourself. And the more you apply your will, the deeper you get. The old saw of when you find that you've dug yourself into a hole, the first thing to do is to put down the shovel. Trying to use your will to solve the problem of addiction is precisely refusing to put down the shovel. And yet there are no answers that seem to be easy. The medical model gets very expensive, and if the will is not fixed, after the medical treatment and the time in rehab, the individual eventually drifts back to his or her habits. Part of the reason Obamacare is so ungodly expensive is that it has to cover addiction treatment, not the first time, not the second time, but as many times as the individual goes back to the bottle or goes back to the needle, and that's a very expensive proposition. The rest of us are compelled to pay for that, along with other silliness that's in the plan. But how does one get out? I'm reminded of how the media pilloried old Nancy Reagan when she addressed the problem of addiction, saying, just say no. It can't be that easy. Well, in the end, that has to happen. If that doesn't happen, no other answers suffice. And yet Christians have found, as I mentioned yesterday, that to be under the compulsion of one's will is not to be free. To be in the Spirit, to be guided and shaped by the person of Christ, to be drawn and brought forward by the Spirit of the Father and the Son, to be one who is ineluctably destined to find the fulfillment of one's life and to have that fulfillment blossom so fully that it begins to blossom even into this world. Therein lies the key to addiction. It's not easy. It is a well that must be drunk from again and again. But maybe Nancy would have done a little better if she'd said, just pray. It's tough. This is the end of the installments on the fruits of the Spirit. We'll do something entirely different on Monday. God bless.